guys, and welcome to the first episode of my new series, Automotive Icons, where we highlight, or should I say, acknowledge some of the great things that have happened in the automotive industry in the past and present to change the game in some type of way. But today, we are going to talk about the Dodge brothers and what they meant to history. I'm telling you, these guys are more than what you think. Both brothers were born in the 1860s in Niles, Michigan, where their father, Daniel Dodge, ran a machine shop specializing in internal combustion engines for marine use. The family moved to Battle Creek, Michigan between 1882 and 84, then to Port Huron at the end of 1884. And finally, in 1886, John, now 22, and Horst, now 18, the family moved to Detroit, Michigan, where the brothers got jobs at Murphy Boiler Works as boiler makers. This is where they began shaping their machinist skills. Life was steady until 1894, when the brothers moved across the Detroit River to Windsor, Ontario, to work as machinists for the Dominion Typograph Company, where they started learning how to manufacture precision metal products. By this point, the brothers understood that John was the sales numbers managerial type of guy, and Horst was a gifted mechanic, always tinkering. So they worked well together, inseparable, most people say. This is where the story of the Dodge brothers began. Horst invented and patented the first 4-point dirt-proof adjustable bicycle ball bearing, and in 1897, despite dealing with the loss of their father Daniel, the brothers established a deal with a third-party investor named Fred S. Evans and opened up Evans and Dodge Bicycle Company. I wonder if you can find a Dodge bicycle today. I will buy one. But a few years later, in 1900, they sold their interest in the bicycle business for $3,700. Moved back to Detroit and used the proceeds to set up their first machine shop in the Bordeaux building on Beaubien Street in Lafayette, later moving to Hastings Street. In their first year, starting off with 12 employees, the Dodge brothers were making parts for stoves, but soon began making parts for the automotive industry, building a strong reputation in Detroit for making the best products available. Months later, the brothers won a contract to build transmissions for Ransom Olds, yes, Oldsmobile, where the brothers continued to grow the reputation for quality and service that was unrivaled. The following year, in 1902, Olds executives were so pleased with the Dodge brothers' work, they offered them a second contract, but the brothers declined. Why? So they can retool the Detroit plant to build engines. For who? Henry Ford. The brothers were approached by Henry Ford with big plans to build a new automobile, and he wanted them to become the exclusive suppliers of 650 chassis, which included engines, transmissions, and axles. But Ford didn't have the capital, so he offered the brothers 100 shares worth $10,000, which was 1/10 ownership of the new Ford Motor Company. And on February 23rd, 1903, the brothers formally agreed and a profitable future was ahead. Now, think about it. The Dodge brothers own 10% of Ford. You guys didn't know that, I bet. Ford Motor Company was incorporated on June 16th, 1903. Dodge delivered the first shipment of chassis to the Mack Avenue plant in July via horse-drawn hay racks, and the Ford Motor Company assembled its first car. Ford paid the brothers $250 per chassis, which kept the 150 men at the retooled Dodge brothers plant busy. During these early years of their partnership, Ford often complained about Dodge workers building poor quality products because they were paid by the part and not by the hour. Despite these issues, Ford ordered another 755 engines for delivery in January through May of 1904 and insisted the brothers build an additional 500 by early April. By 1905, when Ford moved to his new Piggott Avenue plant, the Dodge brothers supplied 400 chassis a month, engines and transmissions. But by late 1905, Henry Ford had been secretly developing his own transmission at a cheaper price for the Ford Model N. I guess he wanted to get rid of the Dodge brothers already. At this point, their partnership was like a bad marriage. In 1910, the Dodge brothers began building a new plant on their 30-acre lot in Hamtramck. In this same year, Ford opened this Highland Park complex. In 1912, the Dodge brothers supplied Ford with 180,000 transmission axle sets. In 1913, John Dodge, who was the director and VP of the Ford Motor Company, resigned, fearing that the fate of their business lay in the hands of their only client and they could miss out on bigger opportunities. So the brothers handed Ford the contractual 1-year notice that they were terminating their partnership effective August 1914. They then formed Dodge Brothers Motor Car Company and developed their own line of automobiles, but the brothers still kept their stock that they were given from Ford in the very beginning. Throughout this year, the brothers collected $3.8 million in dividends from their stock and another $1.7 million in profits on the contract with Ford. I'm sure Ford was pissed off at this point. They've terminated their contract and they're still making millions off of everything he sells. November 12th, 1914, the very first Dodge car rolled off the assembly line they named Old Betsy, a 25 horsepower 4-cylinder L-headed engine 5-passenger touring car, featuring a 3 7/8 inch bore and a 4.5 inch stroke with a pressurized fuel system for only $800. This sounds good today, but when you take that money from then and turn it into now, that's about $24,500, which seems still pretty all right for something new and innovative. All parts for the new vehicle went through rigorous tests prior to approval. John Dodge tested tires by dropping various brands off the top of a 4-story building and crashing one prototype into a wall at 20 miles an hour. That's dedication. In the first year, the Dodge brothers managed to sell 249 touring cars, but the following year, Dodge offered a 2-passenger Roadster with a price tag of $785, and the new plant went into full production. But now the Dodge brothers have acquired a new client, the United States military. As the U.S. entered the First World War, the Dodge brothers built their first pickup truck for the occasion. The Dodge brothers increased their workforce to 7,000 by April 1915, and by the end of the year, produced 45,053 cars at the Hamtramck plant. Now, there's a new player in the game, on the side of Ford, Chevy, and Cadillac. By this point, the Dodge brothers had an exceptional reputation in durability and dependability. In 1916, Ford reduced dividends to stockholders, affecting the Dodge brothers' profits. The brothers brought a lawsuit against Ford Motor Company and won, forcing Ford to pay dividends at over $19 million in early 1918, with 10% of that going to the Dodge brothers. This same year, Lieutenant George S. Patton Jr. led a successful surprise raid on Mexican bandit Pancho Villa's headquarters in 3 Dodge vehicles. The vehicles played such a big role in the success of the mission, Brigadier General John J. Pearson requested 250 more for the Mexican campaign and continued to drive them in the battlefields of France. In the following years, sales of the Dodge brothers skyrocketed. Production numbers were 70,000 in 1960. The following year, with 124,000 automobiles produced, and by 1920, 145,000 vehicles were coming off the line. At this point, Dodge was the 4th largest producer in the United States by 1917. Right behind Ford, Chevy, and Buick. But it's a little comical to know, in July of 1919, Ford bought out the remaining stocks of the Ford Motor Company, and the Dodge brothers accepted a $25 million check for their 10% interest in the company, which severed the relationship between Ford and the brothers for good. And at the end, the Dodge brothers' initial $10,000 given to them by Ford turned into over $32 million, and Ford had to sit back and watch the Hamtramck plant be resurrected off of his money. This same year, 1919, the Dodge brothers produced 121,039 vehicles and were second place to Ford, totaling nearly $121 million in sales. The following year, in January of 1920, brothers attended the National Automobile Show in New York City, which was their auto show in those days. Both the brothers contracted influenza and pneumonia during the flu pandemic of 1918. John Dodge lied in his bed at the Ritz-Carlton, where he had an apartment in New York, and was unable to recognize his wife and daughter, who were with him before he became unconscious. And on January 14th, 1920, John Francis Dodge died. Horace, having relapsing health issues resulting from influenza, fought pneumonia and cirrhosis of the liver throughout the rest of the year, and on December 10th, 1920, Horace Elgin Dodge died at the age of 52 in Palm Beach, Florida. The Dodge brothers' wives made a terrible attempt in managing the company, and the children were unwilling or able to fill their father's shoes. So they appointed Frederick J. Haynes as CEO until 1925, where the company continued to grow, with production output reaching around 200,000 in 1925. And on May 1st of 1925, the Dodge family announced the sale of the company to New York investment banker Dillon Reed and Company for $146 million. And 3 years later, in May of 1928, Dodge was purchased for $170 million by Walter P. Chrysler. And that is a whole nother story for another time. But I thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment at the bottom if you would like to see a particular topic talked about, or if there's things that you would love to see on this channel. But until next time, thank you guys.